Picture this. You have a deadline for a client, a huge list of to-dos for yourself that you're hoping to get started on, a bunch of summer camp signups that you need to do for your kids, and you just remembered that the jersey they need for their game tomorrow morning is still dirty. Did I mention that everyone also needs to be fed at some point? You might think that knowing all these things need to be done would be just the thing that you needed to get your butt in gear and actually follow through. But instead, because you are already struggling with executive functions like motivation and task initiation and decision fatigue, your ADHD brain basically says, "That's it, I'm tapping out." If this has happened to you, there's a good chance that you've experienced what's called ADHD paralysis. And on today's episode of the ADHD Mompreneur, we are going to discuss what ADHD paralysis is, what the symptoms might look like, as well as the different types of ADHD paralysis you may experience, along with some strategies to catch yourself in case you start to spiral. But first, in case you're new here, I'm Christy Lingo, the ADHD Mompreneur. I created mom-centered executive function coaching programs for ADHD mom entrepreneurs like you who are ready to overcome the paralysis and take some action on their big ideas and turning them into the success that they know is possible, all while juggling their family life. I'm incredibly familiar with ADHD paralysis along with all aspects of ADHD because I am also diagnosed with ADHD, along with being the parent of an ADHD child, and I've been working with ADHD populations since I started my first business in 2009. I'd love to help you too. Visit the ADHDmompreneur.com for more information about my coaching programs and to sign up for a free, no obligation 15-minute clarity call to discuss your goals and how I can help. So what is ADHD paralysis? ADHD paralysis happens when your brain becomes so overwhelmed with the information that it is taking in and processing that it basically just shuts down, making pretty much anything impossible to do. Your brain might feel overwhelmed because your executive function is tapped out from trying to focus or follow through or organize your thoughts. Your brain might feel overwhelmed because you are under a lot of stress or because hormone fluctuations are impacting your mood and your emotional regulation. Your brain might feel overwhelmed because you're overstimulated by so much sensory input around you. Your brain might feel overwhelmed because it feels the need to complete a task or project perfectly or else be seen as a failure. And because of all this overwhelm, you just freeze. You see, ADHD paralysis isn't laziness, which is being unwilling to work, or procrastination, which is making a conscious choice to put off a task or project. When your brain and body shut down due to ADHD paralysis, it's usually out of your control. You do want to work and you don't want to put off this task or project, but you just can't seem to jumpstart your brain. Other symptoms that may show up when you're experiencing ADHD paralysis may include difficulty prioritizing, organizing, or making decisions. You may experience feelings of extreme anxiety because you're struggling to make progress on something, or low self-esteem because it doesn't seem like you can ever finish anything. You may also find yourself using avoidance to avoid tasks or situations that might trigger your ADHD paralysis. There are three main types of ADHD paralysis, and while these aren't exactly official medical terms, I would venture to say that all of us ADHDers have experienced each of these types of paralysis at some point. They include ADHD mental paralysis, which could also be described as sensory overload or overthinking. ADHD mental paralysis is a sort of brain crash that makes it really difficult for you to figure out what to do or say next. ADHD task paralysis happens when you feel hesitant or unmotivated to begin or continue work on a task or project. This is where you may see procrastination because you are making a conscious choice to make or not make progress on a certain task or project. And finally, there's ADHD choice paralysis, which is also known as analysis paralysis. This happens when you're struggling to make a decision or you're overwhelmed because you have too many choices. You may continue to gather information or overanalyze the information that you've already gathered, which can actually lead to making the decisions more difficult because the information overload can lead us back to ADHD mental paralysis. So how can we overcome ADHD paralysis when it rears its ugly little head? Let's wrap up today by discussing some ways that we may be able to prevent ADHD paralysis before it starts, as well as some options to dig ourselves out if we do find ourselves frozen. Let's start with what we can do to prevent ADHD paralysis. First, create better awareness. I know I go on and on about creating awareness as an ADHD mom and ADHD entrepreneur, but part of that is because I have been caught in the cycle of I forgot to do something, now I'm rushing to do it, I'm not happy with the job that I'm doing, and I'm upset with myself for both forgetting and doing a subpar job far too many times. Consistently reminding yourself about what needs to be done for your family and your business, what might be on the horizon, and what availability you actually have can go a long way in preventing you from being overstimulated and overscheduled. Next, break tasks down into manageable chunks or easy wins. Instead of writing something like, write podcast episode on your to-do list, try breaking the task down into smaller, more easily completed tasks like research topic, research keywords, bullet point the episode, look for graphics. Because I know that the overall process of writing a podcast episode is going to take me an hour and a half to 2 hours. And I rarely have a full 2-hour chunk that I can dedicate to that. So I would always be talking myself out of that big task. But researching keywords only takes me 10 or 15 minutes. So I can feel like I'm making progress towards my bigger goal without feeling overwhelmed by the amount of time I have to dedicate to it. Number 3, try not to overschedule. This is where that awareness piece comes back in again. Because many of us ADHDers tend to be yes people, we say yes too often, overload our schedules, and then become overwhelmed or start to freeze because we just don't have enough time. Creating and setting clear boundaries around what you can and will commit to as a parent and a business owner can go a long way to preventing paralysis from sensory and schedule overload. And if you find that you're already stuck in a paralysis spiral, here are some strategies to help you stop the spin. First, add in some movement. Moving your body, even if it's not technically exercise, can go a long way in helping to stimulate dopamine production and reduce stress hormones. More dopamine means that your executive functions like focus, motivation, and decision making return, and lower stress hormones mean that you have a little bit less anxiety holding you back. Movement can also signal to your brain on a very base level that the danger has passed and it's okay to unfreeze. You know, that whole fight or flight thing? Next, let go of perfection, which as a recovering perfectionist myself, I realize can be quite difficult to do. I can't even tell you the number of times that I abandoned a task because I didn't think that I had the time or energy to make it as perfect as I thought it should be. If you've been around here for a while, you know that I am a big advocate for creating a full range of positive outcomes rather than being beholden to one perfect particular outcome. It might look something like this. If the perfect version you have in your head would be considered the best version, then the most basic version, where you would consider the task or project complete, would be your good version, and then the better version would be somewhere in between the good and best versions. Aim for good, and if you have time or bandwidth left, keep working towards the better or best versions. And finally, verbally process. One of the things I really love about calls with my clients is when we're able to take a task or project that they have been putting off or avoiding because it feels very overwhelming and break it down into smaller, more manageable pieces that they feel comfortable taking action on. Usually what I'll have them do is to walk me through step by step what they would do in order to complete the project, and I take very copious notes about what their process would be. Then, instead of looking at one big, massive task on their to-do list, they are able to take those parts and pieces and assign different times throughout the week that they can complete those parts, all the while working towards the overall goal of completing the task or project. You could do this with a spouse or a friend, an accountability buddy, or with a coach like me. Have you found yourself experiencing ADHD paralysis? Do you have any strategies you use to help get out of a hole? I'd love to hear how you deal with ADHD paralysis, or if you have any additional questions around getting out of ADHD paralysis. Drop me a comment below or leave me a voicemail message at the link in the show description. And make sure that you've hit the follow or subscribe button so you don't miss any upcoming episodes like next week, when I'll be talking about procrastination, motivation, and dopamine. Until then, keep making your ADHD journey part of your success story. We're all rooting for you. If you're a business owning mom with ADHD, you're going to need to grab my free customizable essential checklists for ADHD mompreneurs by visiting bit.ly/checklists for ADHD mompreneurs, or by following the link in the episode description. Do it now before you forget. Until next time,